A woman 4 months pregnant sinks to her knees on the cold laminate floor of the apartment she once called home. Her hands are clasped in a desperate plea. Tears streaming down her face as she begs the man she loves, the father of her unborn child, not to leave her. He stands over her, his face a mask of stone divorce papers held out like a death sentence. He calls her a weight, an anchor, dragging him down from the life he's destined for. But in the darkest moment of her life, a single knock echoes at the door. A knock that will shatter one man's world and expose a secret so vast no one in that room could ever have seen it coming. Stay with us to hear the story of how one woman's deepest betrayal led to the most stunning revelation of all. The silence in their small one-bedroom apartment on the west side of Chicago had become a living entity. It was thick and suffocating, clinging to the worn-out floral sofa and the water-stained ceiling. Amelia traced the rim of her chipped coffee mug, the lukewarm liquid inside a perfect metaphor for her marriage to Ethan. It had once been steaming, full of passion and promise. Now it was just there, stale and unappealing. For 4 years, Amelia had poured every ounce of herself into being the perfect wife for Ethan Cole. She'd learned to cook his favorite meals, ironed his shirts to a perfect crisp, and celebrated his every minor victory at the mid-level investment firm Sterling Cooper, as if he'd just conquered Wall Street. She believed in him with a ferocity that bordered on naive. He was her brilliant, ambitious husband, destined for greatness. She was just Amelia, the quiet girl from a small town who had gotten lucky, or so she had led him to believe. Lately, however, Ethan's ambition had curdled into something bitter and resentful. He came home later, his excuses for networking dinners becoming more frequent and less detailed. The easy laughter they once shared had been replaced by his sharp criticisms about the apartment, about her simple clothes, about her lack of influential friends. The worst of it came from his mother, Margaret Cole, a woman who wore her disappointment in Amelia like a prized diamond necklace. Every Sunday dinner was a trial by fire. Amelia, darling, Margaret had said just last week, pushing a piece of dry roast beef around her plate. I saw that Isabella Vance is back in town. Her family practically owns the Gold Coast. Ethan used to have a little crush on her in college, you know. A man needs a wife who can elevate him, who can open doors. It's a shame some people are just doors themselves, closed ones. Amelia had simply smiled her hand instinctively, going to her stomach where a secret fluttered. She was 4 months pregnant. She hadn't told him yet. She was waiting for the right moment, a moment of joy that might mend the growing cracks in their life. She imagined his face lighting up, the old Ethan returning as he realized they were starting a family. That hope was the only thing keeping her warm in the chilling silence of their home. Tonight, the silence broke. Ethan walked in, not even bothering to loosen his tie. He threw his leather briefcase onto the armchair, the sound making Amelia jump. He didn't look at her. He walked to the window and stared out at the flickering city lights, his back a rigid wall of contempt. "We need to talk, Amelia," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I was just about to start dinner," she offered, her voice small. "I got that steak you like. I'm not hungry." He turned around, and his eyes were like chips of ice. The man she had loved, the man who had once written her poetry on napkins, was gone. In his place stood a stranger. "This isn't working," he said, the words clipped and final. "Any of it." Amelia's heart began to hammer against her ribs. What do you mean?" "Ethan, Is it work? Did something happen? He let out a short, cruel laugh. Yes, something happened. I woke up. I'm 32 years old, stuck in this shoebox apartment, married to a woman with no connections, no ambition, no value. I'm drowning and you're the anchor tied to my feet. Each word was a physical blow. Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. Value. Ethan, I love you. I've supported you in everything. Support, he scoffed, striding across the small living room. Making my dinner and washing my socks isn't support, Amelia. It's housekeeping. I'm being considered for a partner track position. A real one. The kind of position that requires a certain image, a certain type of wife. He stopped in front of her, looking down at her, as if she were a piece of furniture he was about to discard. I want a divorce. The two words hung in the air, monstrous and unbelievable. The world tilted on its axis. The chipped mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor and splattering coffee across the worn linoleum. But Amelia didn't notice. All she could see was the cold, resolute finality in her husband's eyes. The cracks in their porcelain life had just split wide open, and she was falling into the abyss. No, she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. No, you can't mean that. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, he said coldly. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The papers are drawn up. It was then, in that moment of absolute devastation, that her secret came tumbling out, not as a joyful announcement, but as a desperate, last-ditch shield. Ethan, you can't, she cried, her voice breaking. You can't. I'm pregnant. For a fleeting second, a flicker of something unreadable crossed Ethan's face. Shock. Maybe. But it was extinguished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by an expression of profound irritation, as if her pregnancy was not a miracle, but a poorly timed inconvenience. You're what he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Pregnant Amelia repeated, a fresh wave of tears blurring her vision. She stood up, her hands protectively, cradling her still flat stomach. I'm 4 months along. We're going to have a baby, Ethan. A family. Doesn't that change everything? She searched his face for a sign of the man he used to be, the man who had talked about teaching their future son to play catch in Lincoln Park. Instead, she saw a calculating coldness that terrified her. He took a step back, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. You should have told me sooner. It was an accusation, not a lament. I was waiting for the right time. I wanted it to be a happy surprise. A happy surprise. He laughed again, a sound utterly devoid of humor. Amelia. This isn't a surprise. It's a complication. A maneuver. Did you think trapping me with a child would work? The word trapping struck her like a slap. Trap you, I thought it would make you happy. This is our baby. No, he said, pointing a finger at her. It's your problem now. He turned away, pacing like a caged animal. This changes nothing. In fact, it makes it more urgent. I need to be free of this mess before my career really takes off. The cruelty was breathtaking. Amelia felt a dizzying sense of unreality. This couldn't be the same man who'd held her and whispered promises under the stars on their honeymoon in Tuscany. That man was a ghost, and this stranger wore his face. So that's it, she choked out. You're just going to abandon us. Your child. I'll pay child support, he said dismissively, as if discussing a utility bill. Whatever the state mandates, a clean break is better for everyone. You can go back to wherever it is you came from. Some quaint little town in the middle of nowhere, right? You'll be fine. The condescension in his voice was the final straw. The part of her that had been desperately clinging to hope finally shattered. She saw him clearly now, not as her husband, but as a man whose ambition had consumed his soul. Over the next week, the apartment became a war zone. Ethan moved into the spare room, which was barely a closet, and their interactions were clipped and hostile. He spoke to her, only to demand when she would be signing the papers he'd had couriered over. They offered a pittance, a one-time payment of $10,000 to help her get back on her feet. It was an insult, a clear message of how little he valued their 4 years together. Amelia's only solace was her daily phone call with her best friend, Clara, a sharp-witted nurse who had never trusted Ethan. "He's a snake," Amy Clara said, her voice laced with fury. "A social-climbing viper. $10,000. After you put him through the last 2 years of his MBA program, working that awful waitressing job. He's garbage." "But what do I do, Clara?" Amelia sobbed into the phone. "I have nothing. He was my whole life." "No, he wasn't. He was a chapter. A terrible, poorly written chapter. You are so much more than his wife. You need to fight him. Get a lawyer." But Amelia couldn't. The thought of fighting, of the ugliness of a legal battle while carrying their child, felt insurmountable. She was exhausted, heartbroken, and terrified. All she wanted was for this nightmare to be over, for the old Ethan to walk through the door and tell her it was all a horrible mistake. The final devastating blow came on a rainy Tuesday. Amelia had been feeling sick all morning and was lying on the sofa when Ethan came home in the middle of the afternoon. He wasn't alone. With him was Isabella Vance. She was everything Amelia wasn't. Tall, impossibly chic in a Burberry trench coat, with blonde hair, styled in a way that screamed money. Her smile was polished and predatory as she surveyed the shabby apartment with open disdain. "Ethan, darling, this is charmingly rustic," Isabella said, her voice dripping with condescension. Ethan didn't even look at Amelia. "It's a temporary setback. Isabella is helping me look at condos on the Gold Coast." Amelia pushed herself up, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. "What is she doing here?" "Ethan, Isabella is my future, Amelia," he said, finally turning to face her. His arm was now wrapped possessively around Isabella's waist. "She understands my world. She's part of it. Her father, a managing partner at Vance Capital, is very interested in my career trajectory." Isabella looked at Amelia's slightly rounding stomach with a look of pure disgust. "I heard about your situation," she said, as if Amelia had a contagious disease. "Ethan has been so stressed. It's terribly unfair of you to burden him like this at such a pivotal moment in his life." The audacity of the woman, standing in her home beside her husband, lecturing her on fairness. A hot, unfamiliar anger began to burn through Amelia's grief. "You need to leave, Amelia," said her voice trembling but firm. Isabella just laughed. "Oh, I think it's you who'll be leaving, dear. Now be a good girl and sign the papers. Ethan and I have dinner reservations at Alinea." Ethan walked over to the coffee table and slapped the divorce papers down. "Sign them, Amelia. It's over. Stop making this so pathetic and dramatic." Pathetic. The word echoed in her ears. He saw her love as pathetic, her pain as dramatic, her child as a burden. She looked from his cold, impatient face to Isabella's smug, triumphant one. They were a matched set. Two predators who had just cornered their prey. And in that moment, Amelia knew that begging wouldn't work. Pleading was useless. The man she had married was truly gone, and in his place was a monster. The rain outside lashed against the windows, a furious, weeping sky that mirrored the storm inside Amelia's heart. Isabella and Ethan stood there, an unholy alliance of privilege and cruelty waiting for her surrender. The sight of them together in her home, discussing their future while systematically dismantling hers, was a unique form of torture. Just sign it. Amelia. Ethan repeated his voice, tight with annoyance. He tapped his expensive watch. We're going to be late. Amelia's gaze fell to the papers on the table. Dissolution of marriage. Ethan Cole and Amelia Cole. The words were so clinical, so sterile, for something that felt like an amputation of the soul. Beside it lay a pen, sleek and silver, an instrument of execution. She sank to her knees. It wasn't a calculated move. It was a complete collapse of her spirit. Her legs simply gave out, unable to support the weight of her grief and despair. The worn carpet scratched against her knees. She looked up at Ethan, her vision swimming with tears, the last vestiges of her pride crumbling away. Please, she whispered, the sound raw and broken. Please, Ethan, don't do this. Think about the baby. Our baby. How can you look at me, at our life together, and just throw it away for her? Her head gestured weakly toward Isabella, who was now examining her manicure with an air of supreme boredom. Ethan's face hardened into a mask of disgust. Get up, Amelia. You're embarrassing yourself. I don't care about embarrassing myself, she cried, her voice rising with hysteria. I care about my family. The one you're destroying. I gave up everything for you, for us. And what was that exactly? Isabella interjected, her voice like ice chips. This dreary little apartment. A future of clipping coupons. Ethan is destined for more. He needs a partner, not a charity case. The venom in Isabella's words was potent, but it was Ethan's silence, his tacit agreement, that wounded Amelia most deeply. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend their history. He just stood there, letting this other woman eviscerate the life they had built. Margaret is coming over as well, Ethan added, as if dropping another bomb would somehow expedite the process. She's bringing a notary. We are finishing this tonight. His mother. Of course. The architect of so much of her misery would be present for the final demolition. A family affair. Amelia's pleas died in her throat. She could see it was useless. They weren't just ending a marriage. They were performing an exorcism, purging the inconvenient, simple girl from their glittering, ambitious lives. She was at her lowest point, on her knees, pregnant alone and being treated as less than human. A profound and chilling emptiness settled over her. This was rock bottom. It was cold and dark, and there was nowhere else to fall. A key turned in the lock, and Margaret Cole swept in, shaking a ridiculously expensive-looking umbrella onto the welcome mat. She was followed by a nervous-looking man in a rumpled suit clutching a briefcase. The notary. Well, well. Margaret said, her eyes taking in the scene with theatrical satisfaction. Amelia on the floor. Ethan and Isabella standing over her like victors. It seems we're at the finale. Amelia, for heaven's sake, get off the floor. You're making a scene. Amelia didn't move. She couldn't. She was paralyzed by the sheer consolidated cruelty of the three people in front of her. "Let's get this over with," Ethan said impatiently, picking up the pen and holding it out to Amelia. "Sign. Now." The notary cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you'll need to sign on the designated line. I can witness—" Amelia stared at the pen. It was the same one she'd given Ethan for their second anniversary. An elegant Waterman pen. He'd said he would use it to sign the most important deals of his life. And here it was. Something inside her, a tiny flickering ember that had been all but extinguished, suddenly glowed with a spark of defiance. It wasn't a roaring flame of anger yet, but a quiet, firm refusal to be utterly annihilated. She had begged. She had pleaded. She had offered her heart, and they had stomped on it with designer shoes. She would not, she decided, give them the satisfaction of signing her own execution order while they watched. Slowly, shakily, she pushed herself to her feet. Her hands were still trembling, but her gaze was steady as she looked at Ethan. "No," she said. The word was quiet, but it resonated in the silent room with the force of a shout. Ethan's jaw tightened. "What did you say I said no? I will not sign these papers tonight. Not like this." Margaret scoffed. "Oh, don't be ridiculous, child. What difference will a day make? You're just delaying the inevitable." Maybe Amelia said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength she didn't know she possessed. "But I will not be bullied into signing away my life by the three of you in my own home. You will all have to leave." Isabella laughed out loud. "How quaint. She's developed a spine." "A little too late, wouldn't you say?" "Darling." She purred at Ethan. "This is still my name on the lease," Amelia Ethan threatened, taking a menacing step closer. "My home. You will sign, or I swear I will make your life a living hell. You will walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back." The threat hung in the air. The notary shuffled his feet nervously. Margaret looked on with a smug smile, confident in her son's power. Amelia felt the terror coiling in her gut again. He could do it. He would. He had no conscience left. She was trapped, utterly and completely trapped. The brief spark of defiance guttered, and the cold de foudre washed over her once more. She reached a trembling hand toward the pen, her will finally broken. And then a knock echoed at the door. It wasn't a polite tap. It was a loud, authoritative, three-part rap that commanded attention. Everyone froze. They weren't expecting anyone else. "Who the hell is that?" Ethan snapped, annoyed by the interruption. He stomped over to the door and yanked it open. Standing in the hallway was a man who seemed to take up all the available space. He was tall, impeccably dressed, in a dark, tailored suit that probably cost more than their apartment's rent for a year. He had a shock of silver hair, a face carved from granite, and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He radiated an aura of immense power and zero tolerance for nonsense. Behind him stood a younger, equally well-dressed man, holding a leather portfolio. Ethan stared, momentarily speechless. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone of aggressive annoyance softening into confusion. The man's piercing gaze swept past Ethan, past Margaret and Isabella, and settled on Amelia. His hard expression softened for a fraction of a second, a deep and ancient pain flashing in his eyes. "I'm looking for my daughter," the man said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that filled the small apartment. "Amelia Sinclair." The name dropped into the room like a 10-ton weight. "Sinclair. Ethan's face went blank with confusion. Sinclair. Her name is Cole. Amelia Cole. He glanced back at Amelia as if she could explain the presence of this imposing stranger. Margaret's brow furrowed. The name Sinclair tickled a part of her brain associated with Forbes magazine covers and the financial news network that droned on in the background at her country club. She couldn't quite place it, but it felt significant. Isabella Vance, however, went rigid. Her face, moments ago so smug and condescending, paled to the color of chalk. Her eyes widened in dawning horror. She knew exactly who this man was. Everyone in her world knew. The man ignored Ethan completely. His gaze locked on Amelia. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" he asked, the gravelly voice, now softened with a paternal concern that was so foreign in that room it felt like a different language. Amelia could only nod, tears welling up in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. A dam of unspoken history, of pride and pain and estrangement was breaking inside her. "Dad." She whispered the word, barely audible. The collective gasp in the room was sharp and audible. Ethan whipped his head back and forth between the Titan in the doorway and his weeping, pregnant wife. "Dad, what is he talking about?" "Your father is a retired school teacher from Ohio. You told me he died 2 years ago. I lied," Amelia said, her voice shaking but clear. "I lied because I was ashamed. Not of him, of myself. We were estranged. I didn't want his name, his money, or his influence to be a part of our life. I wanted you to love me, Ethan. Just me." The man in the doorway finally turned his cold, analytical gaze upon Ethan. It was like being pinned by an entomologist studying a particularly repulsive insect. "So you're Ethan Cole," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. The mid-level analyst who thinks he's a kingmaker. He stepped into the apartment, and the room seemed to shrink around him. The man behind him, his lawyer, Mr. Davies, followed silently and closed the door, shutting them all in. You're Arthur Sinclair." Isabella stammered, her voice a squeak. "Of Sinclair Global." Margaret Cole's jaw dropped. Now she remembered. Arthur Sinclair, the legendary reclusive billionaire, a ruthless titan of industry who had built a global empire from nothing. He was spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. His net worth was a figure with at least 10 zeros. He didn't just own companies, he owned entire sectors of the economy. Her son, her ambitious partner-track son, had been married to the daughter of Arthur Sinclair for 4 years, and had been in the process of divorcing her for a paltry $10,000. The sheer catastrophic stupidity of it was so immense, Margaret felt suddenly faint. She stumbled back and sank onto the arm of the sofa. Ethan looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. His face was a grotesque tableau of shock disbelief and a rapidly dawning, sickening realization of the magnitude of his mistake. He looked at Amelia, really looked at her for the first time in months. Not as his simple, burdensome wife, but as the hidden heiress to a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. The woman he had just called a weight and an anchor. Arthur Sinclair's eyes swept over the cramped apartment, taking in the worn furniture, the shattered mug on the floor, and the divorce papers on the coffee table. His expression grew darker with every detail. "It seems I've arrived at an opportune moment," he said, his voice dangerously calm. He walked over to the coffee table and picked up the papers. He scanned the settlement page, his lip curling in utter contempt. $10,000, he said, the words dripping with ice. You're divorcing my pregnant daughter, and you value her, and by extension, my grandchild, at $10,000. He tore the papers in half, then in quarters, the sound of ripping paper like gunshots in the silent room. He let the pieces flutter to the floor, like confetti at a funeral. The divorce is off the table, he announced. Or more accurately, we will be proceeding with a divorce, but on our terms. Mr. Davies. The lawyer stepped forward and opened his leather portfolio. Mr. Cole. He began, his tone crisp and professional pursuant to Illinois state law, given the duration of the marriage and the circumstances you have manufactured. Mrs. Cole, or rather Ms. Sinclair, is entitled to 50% of all marital assets. Furthermore, given the emotional distress and the bad faith you have exhibited, we will be petitioning for significantly more. Ethan finally found his voice, a strangled, desperate sound. Wait, Amelia. Honey, this is all a misunderstanding. I was stressed. I didn't mean any of it. He rushed to Amelia's side, trying to take her hand, but she flinched away from him as if his touch were poison. Don't you dare touch her, Arthur. Sinclair snarled, taking a protective step in front of Amelia. His powerful presence was a shield she had forgotten she had. Mr. Sinclair. Sir. Ethan babbled, turning his attention to the man who held his entire world in his hands. I love your daughter. I really do. I made a terrible mistake. We can work this out. I can make her happy. Arthur Sinclair looked at Ethan with an expression of such profound loathing, it seemed to suck the warmth from the room. You had 4 years to make her happy, he said quietly. Instead, you broke her heart. You stood by while your mother and this socialite. He gestured dismissively at Isabella. Humiliated her in her own home. You valued her at less than the price of the car I bought my driver last Christmas. Your window for working this out closed the moment you brought another woman into this house. Your chance at being a part of this family, of knowing my grandchild, just went up in smoke. He then turned his piercing gaze to Isabella Vance. And you. Miss Vance, your father's company, Vance Capital, has been trying to secure a meeting with my acquisitions team for 6 months. Is that correct? Isabella turned white. I don't handle that side of the business. No, you don't, Arthur agreed. You just reap the benefits. Consider that meeting and any future possibility of a capital infusion from Sinclair Global permanently cancelled. Tell your father that trying to use my future son-in-law to get to me was a poor strategy. Trying to replace my daughter was a fatal one. He had dismantled them all in less than 5 minutes. Their ambitions, their schemes, their entire sense of self-worth lay in tatters at his feet, along with the shredded divorce papers. Ethan's face was a mess of sweat and desperation. Please, sir. Amelia, tell him. Tell him we can fix it. Amelia looked at the man she had once loved, now reduced to a pathetic, groveling mess. The love was gone, replaced by a cold, clear-eyed pity. The man she married had never truly existed. He was just an illusion she had desperately wanted to believe in. The real Ethan was this creature before her, a man who loved only money and status. She took a deep breath, stood tall, and looked her father in the eye. Dad, she said, her voice steady and strong. I want the divorce. Amelia's words hung in the air, clear and resolute. The declaration coming from the woman who had been on her knees begging just 10 minutes earlier was the final definitive shift in the room's power dynamic. It was no longer Ethan's show. It wasn't even Arthur Sinclair's. It was Amelia's. Ethan stared at her, his mouth agape. "Amelia, no. Baby, you don't mean that. You're emotional. You're pregnant. You can't make a decision like this right now." His tone was pleading, condescending, and desperate all at once. He was trying to reclaim his old role as the rational husband managing his overly emotional wife. But that woman was gone. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life," Amelia replied, her voice cold. She met his gaze without flinching. "You showed me exactly who you are, Ethan. I believe you." Arthur Sinclair placed a gentle, reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder. "The decision is hers," he said, his voice a low rumble of finality directed at Ethan, "and my organization will provide the means to execute it. Mr. Davies, perhaps you could enlighten Mr. Cole on what his immediate future looks like." Mr. Davies, who had been standing by with the quiet efficiency of a guillotine operator, stepped forward again. He pulled a sleek tablet from his portfolio. "Mr. Cole," he began, his tone utterly devoid of emotion. "While the marital assets within this apartment are frankly negligible, our preliminary discovery has been quite fruitful." He tapped the screen. "You were recently given a promotion to senior analyst at Sterling Cooper, correct? It came with a significant pay rise and a performance bonus you were anticipating at the end of the fiscal year." Ethan nodded dumbly, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Maybe he could argue his earning potential, use it as leverage. "Yes. I'm on the partner track. My prospects are excellent." Arthur Sinclair let out a dry, mirthless chuckle. "Prospects? Son, you don't have prospects. You have a benefactor," Mr. Davies continued seamlessly. "Sinclair Global, through one of its subsidiary holding companies, acquired a 48% controlling interest in Sterling Cooper 8 months ago. The acquisition was kept quiet for market stabilization purposes. Ethan's blood ran cold. He had no idea. No one at the firm did. Your performance reviews over the last 3 years have been average at best." Mr. Davies went on swiping through screens of data. "Your superiors noted a lack of innovative thinking and an over-reliance on social maneuvering rather than substantive work. However, 6 months ago, a directive came down from the new board to identify and foster potential. Your name was put on a special list. You were given the best accounts, your mistakes were quietly covered, and your successes were magnified. Your promotion wasn't earned, Mr. Cole. It was curated." Ethan's face was ashen. Curated by who? Why? Arthur Sinclair answered, his voice laced with venom. "By me. When Amelia told me she was in love with some ambitious young man, I did my due diligence. I saw a man of mediocre talent with an outsized ego. My daughter, however, believed in you. She asked me to stay away to let her live her own life, and I respected that. But I am not a fool. I don't leave my daughter's happiness to chance." He took a step closer to Ethan, his immense presence making Ethan flinch. "So I created a test. I bought your company. I paved a golden road for you, removing every obstacle. I wanted to see what kind of man you would become when you thought you were succeeding on your own merit. Would you become a grateful, loving husband to the woman who believed in you from the start? Or would you reveal yourself to be the worthless, social-climbing parasite I suspected you were?" He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You have answered my question most definitively. Margaret Cole made a small, strangled sound. Her son, her brilliant boy, wasn't a rising star. He was a lab rat in a billionaire's experiment. Mr. Davies delivered the coup de grace. As of 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, Sterling Cooper will be undergoing a corporate restructuring. Your position is being eliminated. The performance bonus is of course rescinded. And as you signed a 5-year lease on your new BMW, based on your projected income and used company credit for several non-business-related expenditures. He glanced pointedly at Isabella. I project you will be in a significant amount of personal debt within 60 days. Ethan staggered backward, physically reeling from the information. His job, his car, his future, all of it was an illusion. A house of cards built by the man he had just tried to swindle, and that man was now blowing it all down. He turned his wild, desperate eyes back to Amelia. Amelia, you knew? Was this all some kind of sick game to you? No, Amelia said, shaking her head. The genuine pain in her voice cut through the tension. I had no idea about any of this. I thought your success was real, and I was so proud of you. Her voice broke on the last few words, the ghost of her love, still a tender wound. That more than anything seemed to finally break Ethan. The knowledge that she had genuinely loved him, had genuinely believed in his sham success, and he had thrown it all away. Arthur Sinclair wasn't finished. He turned to the notary, who was trying to merge with the wallpaper. You can go. Your services will not be required. The man practically sprinted out of the door. Then he faced Margaret. Madam, he said, his voice dangerously low, I have transcripts of every single Sunday dinner for the past 2 years. My daughter thought she was just venting to her best friend, Clara. But Clara is a very loyal friend. She recorded it all. The insults, the condescension, the constant undermining of my daughter's worth. A good lawyer could frame that as a campaign of intentional infliction of emotional distress. Margaret's carefully constructed composure shattered. She stared at him, speechless with terror. Get out of my daughter's home, Arthur commanded. Margaret didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her purse and scrambled out, not even sparing a glance for her imploding son. Now only 4 remained. Arthur, Amelia, Mr. Davies, and the wreckage of Ethan and Isabella. As for you, Mr. Cole, Arthur said, you will pack a bag with your personal effects. Facts. You will be staying at a hotel tonight. My driver will take you. You will not contact Amelia again, except through her attorney, Mr. Davies. Is that understood? Ethan could only nod, a broken man. He stumbled toward the bedroom like a zombie, his grand ambitions reduced to ash. Finally, Arthur Sinclair looked at Isabella Vance, who was frozen in place, a statue of horrified privilege. You're still here, he stated flatly. Isabella flinched and practically scurried to the door, fumbling with the knob before disappearing into the hallway. Her hurried footsteps echoing her retreat from a world she was no longer welcome in. The storm had passed. In the devastating silence that remained, Amelia finally let out a shuddering breath and collapsed into her father's arms, weeping for the love that was lost and for the strength she was finally painfully finding again. The small apartment, once a container of so much pain and tension, was now eerily quiet. The lingering scent of Isabella's expensive perfume and the faint, acrid smell of Ethan's fear were all that remained of the confrontation. Ethan had emerged from the bedroom minutes later, pale and silent, carrying a single duffel bag. He didn't look at Amelia. He couldn't. He walked out the door under the watchful eye of Arthur's driver, a man built like a refrigerator who had been waiting silently in the hall. The door clicked shut, a sound of absolute finality. Amelia was sitting on the worn-out sofa, a warm mug of tea that Mr. Davies had somehow produced cradled in her hands. Arthur Sinclair sat beside her, not crowding her, but his presence was a solid, comforting wall. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to be strong, because he was strong enough for both of them. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, staring into the tea. "I'm so sorry I shut you out. I was stubborn and stupid." Arthur sighed a deep, weary sound. He reached over and gently took her hand. His own was large and calloused, the hand of a man who had built things and destroyed them. "You were in love, Amelia. You wanted to build a life on your own terms. There is no shame in that. The shame belongs to the man who couldn't see the value in the gift you gave him." They sat in silence for a moment, the old, painful chasm between them slowly closing. "You bought his company?" she finally asked, a note of disbelief in her voice. "You really did all that I did," he admitted. "When you cut off the trust fund you were supposed to receive on your 25th birthday, you told me you never wanted a dime of my money to influence your life. I honored that. But I have an entire corporate intelligence division at my disposal. I wasn't going to let you face the world completely unprotected." I watched him. I saw his resentment grow as his own meager talents couldn't match his ambitions. I saw him looking at you, not with love, but as an obstacle. The experiment was my last-ditch effort. I gave him the world on a silver platter to see if he would share it with you. He chose to try and trade you in for a shinier model instead. The cold, calculated nature of it was terrifying, but it was also born from a fierce, protective love she had forgotten the feeling of. Mr. Davies cleared his throat softly. "If I may, Ms. Sinclair," he said, pulling out a folder, "we should discuss the next steps. Your father has already taken the liberty of securing a new residence for you at the Four Seasons Residences, a 3-bedroom suite. It's fully furnished and staffed. We can have your personal belongings from this apartment packed and moved by morning." Amelia looked around the shabby apartment. It had been her home, the place she'd poured her love and hope into. Now it just felt like a cage she had been freed from. "Okay," she said quietly. Furthermore, Mr. Davies continued. "We will be filing the divorce papers tomorrow. We will be petitioning for the full 50% of all assets accrued during the marriage, which ironically, thanks to your father's intervention, includes a portfolio of stocks granted to Ethan upon his promotion. They are currently valued at approximately $1.2 million. Amelia's jaw dropped. "He doesn't know about them yet," Arthur added with a grim smile. "They were scheduled to be transferred to his personal account next Monday, a little bonus for his hard work. Now they're a marital asset. Your half will be a nice start for you and the baby." The sheer strategic brilliance was staggering. Ethan had been playing checkers while her father was playing multi-dimensional chess across continents. "We will also establish a trust for the child," Mr. Davies said, "and we will be filing for sole legal and physical custody, citing Mr. Cole's emotional abandonment and moral turpitude. We will not be seeking child support. We will in fact be including a restraining order, preventing him from coming within 500 feet of you or the child." "He won't fight it," Arthur said confidently. "By the time Mr. Davies is done with him, Ethan Cole will be so buried in debt and legal trouble, he will sign anything we put in front of him just to make it all go away. He will vanish from your life, Amelia. I promise you that. It was everything she should have wanted. A clean break. Financial security. Justice. But looking at her father at the ruthless efficiency of his power, she understood for the first time why she had run from it all those years ago. It was overwhelming. "Dad," she said, her voice small. "Thank you. But I need to do this my way, too. I don't want to be a passenger in my own life anymore. I need to be the one driving." Arthur looked at her, his stormy eyes searching her face. He saw not the broken girl on the floor, but a woman forged in betrayal, now tempered with a new hard-won strength. He saw his own Sinclair resilience staring back at him. He nodded slowly. "All right, Amelia. You're the boss. What do you want to do?" "I want that half of the stock portfolio," she said, a new firmness in her voice. "Not because I want the money, but because he worked for it, thinking it was his ticket away from me. There's a poetry in that. I want sole custody, and I want the restraining order. But I want to write him a letter. One final letter. And I want Mr. Davies to deliver it when he signs the final papers." Mr. Davies raised an eyebrow. "A letter, Ms. Sinclair?" "Yes," she said. "Some things can't be said by lawyers. Some things you have to say for yourself." Arthur Sinclair looked at his daughter, and a rare, genuine smile touched his lips. "Whatever you want, sweetheart," he said. "Consider it done." The architect of consequences was ceding control to his creation, and she was about to design her own future. 3 months later, Amelia Sinclair stood on the balcony of her new home, looking out over the sprawling vista of Millennium Park. The city lights twinkled below like a carpet of fallen stars. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the potted hydrangeas that lined the terrace. It was a world away from the cramped, stifling apartment with the water-stained ceiling. Her pregnancy was more pronounced now, a gentle, swelling curve that she cradled with a sense of peaceful ownership. This child was hers, her future, her strength. The past few months had been a whirlwind of transformation. She had moved into the suite at the Four Seasons, a place of quiet luxury and impeccable service. She'd had her first meeting with the board of the charitable foundation her mother had started before she passed away, a foundation Amelia had never felt qualified to be a part of. She found to her surprise that she had ideas. Good ones. She had her father's strategic mind, tempered with a compassion that was all her own. She and her father were rebuilding their relationship piece by painful, honest piece. They had dinner twice a week. They talked about her mother. They talked about the years of silence. He was learning to be a father, not just a protector. And she was learning to accept his help without sacrificing her independence. The divorce had been finalized a week ago. As promised, Ethan had put up no fight. Mr. Davies had presented him with a mountain of his own financial malfeasance and the stark choice between a quiet, quick dissolution or a loud, protracted and public annihilation. He chose quiet. He signed the papers in Mr. Davies's sterile downtown office. After he had signed the last page, relinquishing his parental rights and agreeing to the restraining order, Mr. Davies slid a single sealed envelope across the mahogany table. Amelia's letter. Ethan had opened it with trembling fingers. His face was gaunt, his expensive suit replaced by a cheap, ill-fitting one. He had lost weight, and his eyes were shadowed with the sleeplessness of a man haunted by his own colossal failures. The letter wasn't angry. It wasn't hateful. It was simple and direct. Ethan, I am writing this not to hurt you, but to tell you the truth. I once loved a version of you that I thought existed, a man who was kind and brilliant, and who was going to build a life with me. I see now that the man I loved was a reflection of my own hope, not a reflection of you. You didn't just break my heart. You showed me that it was placed in the wrong hands to begin with. You craved a world of wealth and power, but you had no idea what to do with the real treasure you already held. You traded a diamond for a handful of glitter, and you will spend the rest of your life realizing it was just dust. I am not writing this as a victim. I am writing this as the mother of a child you will never know. A child who will be raised with love, integrity, and the understanding that a person's worth is not measured by their connections or their bank account, but by the content of their character. By that measure, you are the poorest man I have ever known. I forgive you. Not for you, but for me. I release the anger and the pain, and I am letting you go completely. I wish you nothing, because you have become nothing to me. Amelia. According to Mr. Davies, Ethan had read the letter, folded it carefully, and walked out of the office without a word. He had been rendered irrelevant, a footnote in her story. Isabella Vance had moved on her family's company, eventually absorbed by a competitor for pennies on the dollar after Sinclair Global blacklisted them. She and Ethan were just two ghosts haunting the memory of a life that never was. Amelia took a deep breath of the cool night air. She wasn't that begging, broken woman on the floor anymore. The betrayal that was meant to destroy her had in fact been her salvation. It had forced her to her knees, but it had also forced her to look up, to call for help, and to finally stand on her own 2 feet. Her father came out onto the balcony, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. He handed one to her, and they clinked them together gently. To new beginnings, Arthur said, his voice soft. To new beginnings, Amelia agreed, a genuine smile gracing her lips. She wasn't just Amelia Cole, the discarded wife. She wasn't just Amelia Sinclair, the billionaire's daughter. She was Amelia, a mother-to-be, a philanthropist, a survivor. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt completely, unshakably whole. The view from up here was breathtaking, and she knew with every fiber of her being that this was just the beginning. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments do not have to define us. The betrayal that brought her to her knees was the very thing that reconnected her with her family, and most importantly, with her own incredible strength. She transformed from a woman who felt she had no value into a woman who understood her immense worth had nothing to do with money or a man. Her journey teaches us that sometimes the most painful endings are just doorways to beautiful new beginnings, and true power lies in choosing to stand up not for revenge, but for yourself and the future you deserve. Have you or someone you know ever faced a betrayal that ultimately made you stronger? What does it mean to truly know your own worth? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We read every one. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will inspire and move you. Thank you for listening.